Okay, let's kick off this explainer with a question that might sound a little ridiculous at first, but stick with me. How do you actually know the sun is going to rise tomorrow? Your immediate reaction is probably, well, it's risen every single other day of my life, so obviously it's going to rise tomorrow. But what if I told you that from a strictly logical standpoint, your past experience proves absolutely nothing about what's going to happen tomorrow?
Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're tackling a massive, fundamental question. Can we ever really know anything? And to figure that out, we are diving into the incredibly mind-bending ideas of David Hume. He was an 18th century Scottish philosopher and, honestly, the ultimate intellectual disruptor. Hume is famous for taking a literal sledgehammer to our illusions of certainty, forcing us to realize that so much of what we casually call knowledge is built on shockingly shaky foundations. We're going to break down exactly how he pulled off this radical shift and how it permanently changed the course of modern science and philosophy.
So, Section 1, the illusion of certainty. To really get why Hume was such a game-changer, we first need to look at the comforting but fundamentally flawed worldview that everyone was clinging to before he came along and turned everything completely upside down.
Before Hume, heavy hitters like René Descartes and Aristotle operated under this very specific, very confident paradigm. They widely believed the universe was built on divine reason, which meant it was entirely intelligible to human logic. They thought that if you were just smart enough, you could rationally deduce the hidden causes of everything in the universe without even needing to observe them first. Think about a game of billiards. They honestly believed that just by looking at a billiard ball, using pure reason, what philosophers call a priori thinking, you could deduce exactly how it would move and collide with another ball, and that you could achieve absolute certainty about it.
And that brings us to Section 2, Crossing Hume's Fork. To completely dismantle this illusion that everything makes perfect logical sense, Hume introduced a brilliant and, frankly, ruthless framework.
He essentially took human knowledge and sliced it into two completely separate buckets with absolutely zero overlap. On one side of the fork, you've got relations of ideas. We're talking math, geometry, 2 + 2 = 4. All bachelors are unmarried. These things are absolutely certain, but here's the catch. They tell us absolutely nothing about the physical world. On the other side, we have matters of fact. This covers everything that actually happens out there in reality: physics, history, cause and effect. And the key difference? Matters of fact rely entirely on experience, and they can always be denied without creating a logical contradiction.
Which brings us to a wildly famous idea from Hume, captured perfectly right here. What he's pointing out is that denying a matter of fact doesn't break the laws of logic. If I sit here and tell you 2 + 2 = 5, my statement is logically impossible. But if I say the sun will not rise tomorrow, I might sound crazy, but I am not violating any fundamental rules of logic. The laws of nature could just change. The earth could literally stop spinning. Because we can imagine it happening without a logical paradox, we have to consult experience, not pure logic, to know what's actually going to happen in the physical world.
Which leads us right into Section 3, the problem of induction. You see, relying purely on our past experiences to figure out how the physical world works leads us straight into a massive philosophical trap.
Let's look at a totally normal, everyday example of induction. Step 1. You notice a woman walking her dog past your window on a Monday at 8 a.m. Step 2. You observe her doing the exact same thing the next Monday. Step 3. Your brain instinctively extrapolates a general rule. You just assume she walks the dog every Monday. We observe a sequence of events and naturally assume that the future will seamlessly resemble the past. And we do this constantly, all day long, just to survive.
But here is the existential drop. We always expect similar effects from similar causes, right? But Hume asks the million-dollar question, how can you actually prove that? You can't prove it logically because, as we just covered, the future turning out differently isn't a logical contradiction. Okay, well, can you prove it using experience? No, because that's circular reasoning. If you say, I know the past predicts the future because, well, in the past has always predicted the future, you're using the exact assumption you're trying to prove. This means our entire understanding of cause and effect rests on a massive, completely unprovable assumption about the uniformity of nature. Hume just drops the hammer here. This is the absolute core of his problem with induction. He reveals that there is literally zero rational, logical foundation to guarantee that what happened yesterday is going to happen again tomorrow. When you drop a stone, you just assume it's going to fall, but you have no definitive rational proof that it won't suddenly float upwards the next time you let go of it.
Now, if you're feeling a little bit of existential dread right now, I get it. If our reasoning is that fundamentally flawed, how do we know anything at all? Well, Section 4, saved by habit and custom. Just as we're staring into the void of total, paralyzing skepticism, Hume actually pivots to save us.
He argues that we don't actually need a perfect rational foundation to get out of bed and function in the world. Instead, we are saved by what he calls custom, or habit. Hume realizes we aren't guided by some divine, infallible reason, we're guided by a natural animal instinct. It's this psychological habit, not logical deduction, that compels us to expect the sun to rise tomorrow. It's an instinctive mechanism that allows us to survive and navigate reality, even if we can't mathematically prove it will always work.
And listen, this isn't just some dusty 18th century debate. Take a look at this recent academic excerpt. Modern science, probability theory, academia, they are all still actively wrestling with Hume's problem of induction today. The fact that instinct, habit, and probability drive our factual reasoning rather than absolute mathematical certainty is a foundational challenge that scientists and philosophers are literally still writing about right now.
Let's pivot a bit to Section 5, Miracles and Extraordinary Claims. We're going to see how Hume takes all this theory and builds a super practical tool for evaluating the world, particularly for those moments when people claim the impossible has just happened.
Since Hume established that our knowledge comes entirely from repeated past experiences and probability, he formalized what is known as Hume's balancing principle. The famous modern translation you've probably heard is simply, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If someone comes up to you and claims a miracle happened, an event that seemingly breaks the physical laws of nature, how do we as rational people actually evaluate that claim? Hume says you basically have to weigh the evidence on a scale. On one side, you have the astronomical improbability of a miracle actually occurring. Think about it. That requires violating all known laws of nature, which have been established by millions of uniform past experiences. On the other side, you have the probability of witness error. Humans lie, we hallucinate, we get confused all the time. So which is more likely? For Hume, the massive improbability of nature's laws just suddenly breaking will almost always be outweighed by the highly common probability that a human being is just mistaken, or worse, being deceitful.
And all of this brings us right to his ultimate, incredibly pragmatic conclusion on how we should organize our beliefs, conduct our science, and actually live our everyday lives. Section 6, Embracing Mitigated Skepticism.
Hume totally rejects the extreme end of the philosophical spectrum, what's known as Pyrrhonian skepticism. That's the kind of total, radical doubt where you doubt absolutely everything, even your own eyes and ears. Hume says that's impossible and paralyzing. Instead, he champions mitigated skepticism. This is a practical, evidence-based kind of doubt. It means we recognize the hard limits of our human reasoning. Sure, we admit we can't technically prove the sun will rise, but we practically engage with the world anyway by relying on custom and probability.
Because at the end of the day, radical doubt is useless. Why? Because it cannot inform human action. And for Hume, if you can't act on a belief, what's the point? Sure, sitting safely in your armchair, you can logically doubt the law of gravity because you can't prove it a priori. But the very second you walk near the edge of a high window, your natural instinct and custom immediately stop you from jumping out. Nature takes over exactly where reason fails. So how do we actually use this mitigated skepticism? First off, we need to keep our inquiries focused on everyday life and things we can actually observe. Second, we have to base our beliefs strictly on available empirical evidence. Crucially, we just have to accept that scientific knowledge is always probable, never absolutely certain. And finally, we should steer clear of making dogmatic, arrogant claims about subjects that are totally beyond human experience, like the ultimate origin of the universe. Mitigated skepticism empowers us to use empirical science cautiously without the arrogance of pretending we possess absolute, unquestionable truth.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. David Hume brilliantly proved that human reason has hard limits. You absolutely cannot logically prove that the future will resemble the past. But, given the inescapable power of our natural instincts and how incredibly well it works to act on probability, are you really willing to bet against it?